Megan, thank you very much. Now, we started the conversation on divorce last week, the costs of it all. Today, Stewart Welch explains pre- and post-nuptial agreements. Now, we hear a lot about prenups.
We do.
Right, but the post-nuptial agreements, do people usually know about that?
People don't know that much about a postnup. So a prenup is, you get into this and you go, let's decide if this doesn't work, how we're going to divide up assets. Postnup is you're in the marriage and you make a decision to go into an agreement. And a great example would be is if you have a married couple and let's say the wife gets pregnant and together they make a decision that she's going to stay home and raise the children. That's a good time to consider a postnup, because you're basically saying, the wife's saying, I'm giving up my career, and if it doesn't work out, I'm going to have been out of the workforce for a long time, and it's going to be really hard on me to get back into that career. So postnups make a lot of sense.
Do people usually think about that? Because you think about the
They
prenup,
don't.
and then you get into the marriage. Hopefully you're happy, and you don't have to think about a postnup, and it's uncomfortable, I'm sure.
I think well, even the prenups are uncomfortable, so they're all uncomfortable. I think, the marriage is a lot about love, but it's also a little bit about business. And this is the business side of marriage. So what you do is you take the guesswork out. And the reason it's more important now is it has to do with the trends that are happening around divorce. And one of them is joint custody. Instead of typically the wife getting the children, now the children are being split so that it's 1 week with one parent, 1 week with the other, so child support is very limited. You also have alimony is more now viewed as a bridge to get back into the workforce. So instead of lifetime alimony, they're going to give you enough alimony to get back into that workforce. And then if you go to court, the courts now are much less predictable, so you don't know how those assets are going to get divided up.
And how do you approach this? Is there a good way to approach this with your spouse?
Well, it depends on kind of where you are in the stage. I think we would recommend that you consider a prenup. You always recommend that where there's a second marriage, and particularly where there are lots of assets, but more and more people should consider, should we have a prenup? I think once you're in a marriage and there's any kind of substantial change like a child, you consider a postnup. And then I think the new kid on the block is something called a collaborative divorce. And there they actually put together a team that includes attorney for each spouse. It includes typically a mental health professional and a financial advisor. And they all come together in an agreement to try to get through this. The mental health professionals dealing with anger, the financial planner is helping divide the assets. They all agree that if it doesn't work, they can't represent those clients going forward. So it's kind of the new thing on the block, and it's a good idea.
Are you seeing more people get the prenup and the postnup?
Well, no. I don't think, I think maybe there's a bit of a trend in that direction, but it's still a really uncomfortable conversation. But it is a conversation that I think most people should have.
How do you recommend, hey, let's go out and get coffee, and by the way, here's some documents we need to look over?
Well, I think if you're about to get married, you don't want to do it the day of the wedding or the day before, so you want
there
to
may
start
be no
ahead of
wedding.
time. But I think, you just sit down and have a conversation about it and say, let's just talk about something that's not quite so comfortable, and let's talk about the pros and the cons of it.
Right.
And maybe you get a third party in to help you.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Great
Thank you.
information. Hopefully nobody really has to go
Well,
to
we
that.
hope so.
Thank you. Well,